Okay, good to see you, stalwarts. Um, yeah, we live in interesting times. One of these supposed Chinese proverbs, which I've understood is not really a Chinese proverb, but is just purported to be one. May you live, sort of an insult or a threat to someone. May you live in interesting times. So that's us. So let's begin with some prayers. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupasho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangshu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. And then to request to turn the wheel of Dharma, we offer a short mandala. Sashipuki Chukshing Meto Tramri Rablingji Nide Genpadi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Uwagi Drokunam Dakshingla Chupashu. O holy and perfect pure Lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with we who need to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, so yeah. So let's begin with a little meditation. Um, Relaxing your body. Find a good position that you can stay without straining your back. Even if you're lying down, that's okay. If you're seated in a chair, that's okay. And then relax your mind. Remind yourself that you don't have to think about anything else. Place your attention, first of all, on your respiration. And once you've observed it, hold it with a mental factor mindfulness supported by introspection, sort of mental spy that watches whether you are multitasking, some other thoughts are coming or what. make sure that you're engaging the introspection at the beginning, because there's a big chance of other thoughts coming in your mind, disturbing you from watching the respiration. Introspection has to be strong, but later there's less and less need of it until when you reach the ninth stage of shamatha, you can let go of that completely, that mental spy, and invest the energy that you're using to watch the mind back into just the concentration itself. But right now you need to be watching whether you are either losing the object completely or if it's becoming less strong, less vibrant. If you had a little success in calming the mind, now bring your attention to the mental consciousness. Sort of shorthand way, saying it in short, watching First of all, its contents. Recognize its conventional nature as non-obstructing the arisal or reabsorption of mental events into the consciousness. And once you get a mental image of that, even though it's not yet the actual conventional clear light nature, it's just a mental image of it, try to hold that single-pointedly, using the occurrence of distracting thoughts to reaffirm the fact that the mind has this unobstructing nature. Several ways this is similar to meditation on emptiness. Once through observation and logic, you've established the phenomena are empty of inherent existence. You try to stabilize on that. Here, we're stabilizing on a similar space-like experience. And then recall that the Buddha said that this is our conventional Buddha nature. The conventional clear light nature of the mind is our developmental Buddha nature, the conventional Buddha nature. They mean the same thing, different words. And this means that we can develop. We can not only develop, we can get rid of faults. Even if our faults have caused us problems in the past and present, we have habit energy for them, they can be definitely removed. When we say develop, means the mind can not only develop good qualities, but also reduce negative qualities. And this should bring us some sense of peace of mind, more akin to Dharma happiness. I have everything I need to become better. Now I just have to implement that. And the fact that we can feel that, similar to Dharma happiness, in the fact that we have this developmental nature, is due to this auspicious moment that we're living right now as a human being in a place where spiritual practice is permitted. We're not encumbered by the unfree states, the lower realms, and so forth. We're endowed with the teachings of Buddha, spiritual community to support us, benefactors like Shantideva Center to provide resources for us. And this auspicious occasion, just a moment in time, shouldn't be squandered, the Buddha advised us, because it's very rare and difficult to create the causes to find it again, that we should use it for the two great goals of achieving liberation or achieving enlightenment, or at least the causes that lead up to that, lead up to those two end goals: realizations of renunciation, bodhicitta, the right view of emptiness. Recalling Buddha's advice to those of sharp intellect, sharp faculties, especially wisdom, not to be satisfied with his lesser vehicle, teachings, but to strive to enter the Mahayana, the great vehicle that takes oneself and all living beings to the great goal of enlightenment, the Mahabodhi. And that to do so, we have to engage, we have to first develop bodhicitta, which is the defining factor of entering the Mahayana path, opening the door of the Mahayana vehicle, entering it. To do that and to accomplish the goal of bodhicitta, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, for both goals, in order to develop bodhicitta and in order to achieve the goal of bodhicitta, we have to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom explained by Buddha in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, reinvigorated by Nagarjuna several hundred years after the Buddha's passing, and clarified by Buddhapalita, Aryadeva, and especially Chandrakirti. And then renewed understanding for a later time by Lama Tsongkhapa in his Gompa Rapsel, Illumination of the Intent, that we're studying, that lays out the methods, or the strategy to achieve the accumulation of the two collections of merit and wisdom. Collection of merit, cooperative cause, like water, sunlight, and fertilizer, and the substantial, cooperative cause of the form bodies, the Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya, the substantial cause of which is the subtlemost wind, that is the mount of the subtlemost mind. And the collection of wisdom is a cooperative cause for the substantial cause of the subtlemost mind, clear light nature of the subtlemost mind, to become the Dharmakaya, transform into the Dharmakaya. Thinking how difficult it is to advise others, let alone solve our own problems, even if we become a therapist or someone skilled in various methods to help them now, there are many problems we have no idea how to solve. We must develop spiritual insights for first developing single-pointed concentration, say tranquil abiding, to calm the mind, so we're not distracted by the activities of this life so much. then to develop vipassana, penetrative insight, not only into the conventional nature of things, but especially into the ultimate nature of things, to develop not only a conceptual understanding of emptiness, but by familiarizing with it, to have a direct perception, mental direct perception of emptiness, selflessness of our own self, emptiness of our own self, and the selflessness of phenomena, all for the sake of becoming a proper teacher, the best teacher we can be, spiritual teacher, ending up with the state of becoming enlightened, becoming a guru Buddha, not just a guru or a spiritual guide, a Kalya Mitra, spiritual friend. All living beings have been depthlessly kind to us. If we think of the kindest people, kindest episodes of this lifetime, when we've been benefited by someone else, we thought, how kind. Wow, that was so wonderful. All living beings have been immensely more kind in numberless lives than the kindest thing we can remember this lifetime. It's only a matter of time that we don't recognize that, being cut off from the memory of past lives. They themselves are immersed in the ocean, in the cesspool of cyclic existence. And not just leaving them thinking, oh yeah, okay, that's their problem. Feeling affection for them through equality, just as I want to be free of even the smallest sufferings, an itchy feet, whatever, any small little problem I want to be free of. Sentient beings also want to be free, just like us, of suffering. And they want to have happiness, even though they're never satisfied with the samsaric happiness they find. Thinking, I must become a guru Buddha in order to benefit them, in order to spontaneously, without effort, effortlessly, and without error, lead sentient beings out of their present state into the durable happiness of enlightenment, everlasting happiness. With that motivation, thinking, in order to do that, I have to accumulate merit, so I'm going to participate in the lesson on illumination of the intent today and its other topics for that purpose, in order to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. The subject matter is a holy object. Our motivation is hopefully lofty. Those combining together, making very powerful actions, leaving karmic imprints in our mind to be the collection of merit. And any insights we have into emptiness, similar to the collections of wisdom. We're going to participate in order to become a Buddha, a guru Buddha, for the sake of all mother sentient beings. That's my present goal, and that should be our goal every day when we wake up, throughout the day when we can pause maybe to do the succession yoga, if you have a commitment to do that 6 times a day, recalling this is our goal. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, first of all, any observations about our meditation? I think, okay. I hope you're meditating. I assume you are if you turn off your cameras, if you're scrolling on your phone during that time. Hopefully not. Paul, yeah?
Sure, Venerable George. I had a question. I mean, it's rather tangential, but I seem to remember in the life stories of some teachers, they talk about a moment where they truly develop renunciation and kind of commit to that path.
Uh,
Do you remember reading anything about this? Like if I thought there was like a specific phrase or a word for it. Um,
I don't know in Tibetan, of course, the Western, what's the Western thing from the Bible, the road to Damascus moment or something like that
oh,
when that
okay.
saint supposedly, who was that?
I don't
Saint
do that
someone,
literature.
St. Paul, St. Paul.
Saint Paul, our Jewish scholar, has told us about. He's
Well, I
more
just it,
more educated than the people that have some Christian background. Saint Paul. So
okay.
that's what comes to mind. But I can't think in the Buddhist.
Um, hmm. I remember. I can't remember. I think it might have been Geshe Sopa or someone his generation. I remember he told the story that when he was a young monk, he was in the monasteries, and he said one winter was a particularly cold winter. And he said that he heard some commotion outside, and he looked out the window. He said, and he saw 2 monks in a brawl fighting over a yak turd, over who was going
Well,
to get
that turd can be used as fuel.
exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, and he saw that, and he said that was the moment for him where he went, yeah, two people fighting over a yak turd.
Yeah.
That is samsara. I'm done. I'm out of here.
Okay, yeah. I'll try to see if I can figure out some other recall some other incidents from other biographies, but nothing comes to mind, Paul, other than that. I
Okay.
can't think of the Tibetan, if there's a Tibetan expression for that.
Okay. No, because I just recently I've just been sort of remembering some things and thinking about points where I had sort of like similar reactions and just was
Right.
trying to
And I hope you'll be able
that
to,
notion of commitment.
right. I hope you'll be able to tell us in if not already in the near future that yeah, now you're really committed to bodhicitta or really committed to renunciation or something like that. That's what we should
Something like that.
all have that kind of commitment. Okay, good. Anyone
Thank you.
else have a comment or question before we begin? Sean does. Oh no, okay. I thought okay. Uh yeah. So first of all, just to tell where we are, the point where we are right now, and I didn't write it down, Doris. Can you remind us what page in Thupten Jinpa's text we are, and in which page in the FPMT translation?
395 in Jimpa's text and 226 in FPMT.
Three what? In Jinpa?
395,
395 and
226.
226. Yeah, we're moving up there. Okay. I'd forgotten to put those in my thing here. Thank you for that. So essentially, we're going to begin reading here. Chandrakirti then writes, comma, quote, having thus understood the presentation of the three natures, one should explain the intended meaning of the scriptures, unquote. So that's where that's essentially where we said we were going to begin, but we're just a little bit review, first of all. And in reviewing, so yeah, there is in Thupten Jinpa's text before that, he says, yeah. So just before that, he said, Chandrakirti continues. For example, the snake is a false construct. I say a snake is a false construct in relation to a coiled rope, right? It's an imagination that you've imputed upon it that is false, that's not really as that basis. That coiled rope is not a suitable basis of designation. But whereas in relation to an actual snake, it is established as real. That is to say that it's not false, it's not incorrect. It's correct to impute snake, the conventional imputation of snake on a basis of designation, which is an actual snake. That's good if you've gotten that far, because it is not an imputation of something which is not there. Okay, so we talked about that before. Likewise, intrinsic or true nature, too, or also, remains a construct. So this is talking about the false nature that we conceive of, that is inherent nature. So that itself doesn't inherent existence. That meaning of svabhava, that meaning of nature, is false, and that intrinsic or true nature remains a construct. There's an imputation, an imputation of something that does not exist in relation to a conditioned dependent phenomena. That is to say, in relation to an imputedly existent, merely existent phenomena, dependently arisen phenomena. Upon that which actually exists, we're imputing this false nature. So that's one meaning of svabhava. And then we read this 2 lines from Fundamental Wisdom that Jinpa translates as, intrinsic nature is not fabricated. It actually just says svabhava is not fabricated. It is not dependent on others. And we read, we played with that a little bit. Yeah. And so in this regard, Doris, could you put up the first PDF, the one from Geshe Sopa's commentary to the Lanrim Chemo? During our discussion group on Monday, Mikhail, always vigilant scholar, suggested that there were good sections in the Lanrim Chemo translation in English, as well as in Geshe Sopa's commentary to that, which I think we're all aware of that. And so rather than providing both sections, if you have the oh, maybe this is oh, I thought I had, oh yeah, maybe.
Did I give you the wrong one?
This is good. This is good. Yeah, this is okay. This is chapter 16. So this is not Geshe Sopa's commentary. This is from the wisdom publication, I think, of the Lamrim Chapa. Was it published by Wisdom, right, Mikhail? The 3 volumes, some years ago. And this is what the authors call chapter 16, not negating enough. So under negation, So I thought just to read a little bit here, and we'll try to go through it a little bit more on Monday if you have time to be a Dharma geek on the weekdays. So this is, the outline says, refuting an overly restricted identification of the object of negation. So in other words, overly restrictive meaning you're only going to negate something. You're not negating everything that needs to be abandoned or negated, refuted. Okay, so that's under negation, not negating enough. So refuting an overly restricted identification of the object to be negated. The opponent says, the object to be negated is a svabhava, an intrinsic nature that has three attributes. So we're just talking in the quotation from Fundamental Wisdom, the two of these attributes that are mentioned in the quote, unless the third one is hidden in there somewhere. An intrinsic nature would have these three attributes. Causes and conditions do not bring it into being. In other words, it is not a causal phenomena. It has not arisen because of causes and conditions. So that would mean it's a permanent phenomena. It is a non-conditioned phenomena, like unconditioned phenomena, like unconditioned space. Causes and conditions do not bring it into being. So would that apply to both the svabhava that does exist, meaning the ultimate nature phenomena, as well as to the svabhava that does not exist, which is the imagined but perceivable sense of inherent existence? Would you-
Would you mind rephrasing that, Venerable, because I'm not sure I quite understood the question.
Right. So here it says, the object to be negated is an intrinsic nature that has three attributes. Well, let's just read it through, and I'll pause. I'll put the question a little bit later. The object to be negated is an intrinsic nature. So this is talking about the false nature that has three attributes. Causes and conditions do not bring it into being. Its condition is immutable. What does that mean? It doesn't change from moment to moment. And three, it is posited without depending on some other phenomenon. So here this part of Lama Rinpoche quotes Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, and it's the quotation that we have in Gompa Ravsal is the last two lines, right, of the second stanza there. So let's read these two stanzas coming together. It is not reasonable that a nature should arise from causes and conditions. So this is what, speaking to ordinary beings, when we talk about the nature of things, that means that something seems to be existing there from its own side. It's not reasonable that a nature should arise from causes and conditions. If it did arise from causes and conditions, then a nature would be something that is fabricated, that is made up, that is brought about by causes and conditions, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't be an actual nature. Then the second stanza says, how could it be suitable for a nature to be something that is made, that is fabricated? How could that be right? And then the last two lines are the quotation we have in our text. A nature is not fabricated and does not depend on another. So this is an objection that's brought up by someone to the Prasangika. So the Prasangika replies, in general, if someone claims that that internal and external things, such as seedlings, sprouts, have intrinsic nature. So now this is Prasangika saying, telling that if someone claims that these things that have arisen have intrinsic nature, in this sense, in the sense of that stanzas there, Madhyamikas indeed must refute such. However, here, identifying the object to be negated, the object of negation, means identifying the fundamental object of negation. So this is important. When we talk about refuting the object of negation, what's the actual fundamental object of negation? When you refute the fundamental object of negation, then the Madhyamaka view, knowledge that phenomena lack intrinsic nature, that's the correct view, that develops in your mind stream. If you have the fundamental, if you're refuting the right nature. Fallacies arise if we follow the opponent's interpretation. Since the followers or partisans of non-Madhyamaka Buddhist schools have already established that compounded phenomena are produced by causes and conditions and are mutable, that is to say, the opposite of immutable. They are changeable, they're changing moment by moment, right? They're momentarily impermanent. Because of that, we should not have to demonstrate to them the absence of intrinsic nature. Oh, wow, why is that? They also should have recognized that things lack intrinsic nature. So how can this be the unique Madhyamaka object of negation? Simply that things are, if that were said to be the object of negation, that you're negating things being, what does it say? Fabricated and not depending on another. That's not the fundamental object of negation. That's a quality of the object of negation, but it's not the object of negation itself. Many Madhyamaka texts adduce arguments. What does that mean, adduce? Am I pronouncing it right? Adduce? Adduce? Provide? We say,
I think it means obtain, determine, infer.
yeah, where am I? Many Madhyamaka texts infer or adduce arguments such as, if things existed essentially, which is another way of saying inherently, then they could not depend on causes and conditions. They would have to be immutable and so forth. And we ourselves have said that many times, right? If things were inherently existent, they would have to depend on causes and conditions, and they could not change and so forth. Those are consequences that we've risen. But that is not the actual object of negation, just negating that. However, these statements indicate fallacies that would be entailed if things existed essentially. However, these statements indicate fallacies that would be entailed if things existed essentially. They do not identify the object of negation on its own terms. This is what Mikhail had suggested was worth reading in this section. So let's just read through the yellow highlighted section there at the end. It is the case that if something existed ultimately, if it existed in relation, if it existed in reality or truly existed, these are all synonyms for the Prasangika, then it could not depend on causes and conditions and so forth. However, that is not what ultimate existence means. That's not enough to explain what ultimate nature is. For example, even though being a pot means being impermanent, it entails being impermanent, even though that's the case, impermanence is not the proper meaning of pot, right? If you if someone says, "What is that?" If your child says, "What is that?" you would say that's a mug or pot or a vase or whatever kind of shape it is. Um, you wouldn't say that is impermanent. Well, maybe you could say that in some circumstances, but that doesn't identify the pot as opposed to other things to say that it is impermanent, because there are many things that are impermanent, right? For example, even though being a pot entails being impermanent, impermanence is not the proper meaning of pot. Rather, you have to say that a pot means a bulbous, sort of fat, splayed base, spread out base, thing able to perform the function of holding water. That's the famous example of the definition of a vase. That was is flat-based, bulbous bellied, and able to perform the function of holding water. So sometimes people say that's the joked before. That's the definition of a geshe, right? Bulbous, able to hold water, or something like that. Joking. Okay, so that is the actual definition of a pot. Likewise, if something existed ultimately, and so forth, inherently, it would have to be partless. It would have to be a partless thing. That may be true. Still, here in Madhyamaka, we do not suggest that partless thing is the fundamental object of negation. Just to negate something being partless, that doesn't get you to emptiness. Yeah, because for instance, there are the was it Chittamatra proofs that partless particles do not exist, right, in the Chittamatra and in higher schools. But just understanding that doesn't bring you to an understanding of emptiness, that things are not partless. Likewise, if something exists ultimately, it would have to be a partless thing. Still, here in Madhyamaka, we do not suggest that partless thing is the fundamental object of negation, since partless things are merely imputed from the unique perspective of advocates of philosophical tenets, so the Vaibhashikas or others that posit, that propound that there are partless particles. Such notions are not the fundamental cause that binds embodied beings, Luchen, I guess they would say in Tibetan, those beings that have bodies, that binds us into cyclic existence. So this next little sentence or sentence and a half is I highlighted just because it was a little bit of thought-provoking. Further, even if you determined that those partless things lack intrinsic nature and then meditated on that, this would not at all counter the ignorant conception which is operated within us from beginningless time, meaning the conception that holds phenomena to be inherently existent. So my question here is, or my qualm is, he said, further, even if you determined that those partless particles lack intrinsic nature, that they are empty of inherent existence, and then meditated on that, this would not counter the ignorant conception. So if you were to meditate on them as being non-inherently existent, wouldn't that constitute a realization of emptiness? And wouldn't that help to counter the ignorant conception that has operated since beginningless time? Could you follow that, Suvash? You follow it?
Yes, I think I follow your question, and I have not read this aspect of the Lamrim Chenmo, but my but I mean, it's the objective is um, to zero in into exactly what the definition of the object of negation is, and instead of falling into this and that.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but
No, that's not the
go
question.
ahead.
So the question is, if you were to meditate that partless particles were not inherently existent, because that's what it's saying, they lack intrinsic nature, wouldn't that constitute a meditation on emptiness? What do you think, Richard? Is that making sense?
The question is making a little bit more sense to me now, but I think that what the answer is in the next paragraph, which is that the philosophical determination is that the object is conceived by innate ignorance does not exist. And if you simply meditate on the fact that partless particles lack intrinsic nature, you're still not addressing the major question, which is the fact that the partless particles are conceived by innate ignorance, and therefore they don't exist at all in that way.
So Mikhail, I think you and I had a little correspondence back and forth. But what do you think? How do you
The,
rationalize that paragraph?
the thing is that partless thing is in the paragraph before is said to be the object of negation. And usually we are refuting inherent existence on an existing base. But here he's talking about refuting inherent existence, intrinsic nature, on an object of refutation.
On a base that doesn't exist, or
Yeah,
not?
so I don't see how that can help. I mean, you're not refuting true existence on things. You're refuting true existence on non-existing things.
Yeah, and how would one go about that? One could go about that simply by understanding that because it doesn't exist, it's not inherently existent. The same way you could say the son of a barren woman is not brown, is not white, because the son of a barren woman doesn't exist at all. There's no fat son of a barren woman. There is no skinny son of a barren woman. You can refute all sorts of things on it simply by the fact that the son of a barren woman doesn't exist. So I think that's one resolution I was thinking of here when it says, even if you've determined that those partless particles lack intrinsic nature, so that is that that because you've realized that they don't exist, therefore there is no inherently existent version of them because they don't exist at all. Okay, anyway, let's just read a little bit further. Therefore, even optimal and direct knowledge of that would not overcome the innate afflictions. Thus, when making, this is what Richard was referring to, this next paragraph. Thus, when making philosophical determinations, make your principal task to determine that an object is conceived by an innate ignorance does not exist. Ancillary to that, in addition to that, on the side, refute objects of acquired misconceptions. That's not you don't want to take the refutation of the intellectually formed conceptions, intellectually formed ignorance, and so forth, as being your principal object of negation. That will come by the way. If you do not understand this and fail to eradicate the perspective of innate ignorance, so innate ignorance here is not it's not the intellectually formed ignorance. It's the ignorance that we and beetles and horses and cows and insects and gods and pray to be. Everyone has, since beginningless time, this inborn, innate ignorance. If you do not understand this and fail to eradicate the perspective of innate ignorance, then when you refute a personal self, you will only refute a self that is permanent, unitary, or in other words, partless, and independent. When you refute an objective self, you will only refute things that are imputed by the advocates of philosophical tenets, so they say, for instance, the Vaibhashikas or others, such as objects that are partless particles or partless moments of experience. When we talk about the mind, we talk about partless moments of mind, or a natural substrate with the three gunas or strands asserted by the Samkhya's. This is completely inappropriate. Okay, I'm going to leave it. Yeah.
Just about that, Geshe Sopa, if I remember correctly, does not agree with the translation here, because they are talking about the three gunas, and I think Geshe Sopa is referring to the three characteristics of the nature which were mentioned at the beginning of the chapter.
Okay, good to point that out. So we'll stop here on reading this, but we will go back to this on Monday, and especially if you have a PDF, if you can highlight that section where it talked about the three gunas, we'll see. We can read from Geshe Sopa's commentary and compare it to the Tibetan to see what's being talked about there. Okay. Now. Yeah. So we read here this quotation from Fundamental Wisdom. Intrinsic nature is not fabricated. It is not dependent on others. So Lama Tsongkhapa said, thus the true nature cannot be something produced. So in the discussion in the Lanrim Chemo, it seemed like it was talking about the false nature had these three qualities, right? Or two qualities. Whereas here, Lama Tsongkhapa says, thus the true nature. So that, remember, there are two kinds of meaning of svabhava. Up until now, more or less, we've been assuming svabhava always meant something bad. You would need to get rid of it, right? Your conception of it. Om svabhava shuddha sarva dharma, svabhava shuddha ham. All phenomena are pure or purified or lacking svabhava, nature. That means this wrong nature that seems to be inherent existence. And I myself am empty of inherent nature. So that's a mantra that we often say usually in Tantra, but sometimes comes up in other contexts. So here, this is talking about the true nature, another meaning of svabhava that Nagarjuna confounds some of the modern philosophers by saying that nature does exist, meaning this ultimate nature of phenomena. Thus, the true nature cannot be something produced. This intrinsic nature, which is imputed in relation to the reflection-like causally produced world of dependent origination, the things we can perceive and observe right here and now, within the sphere of Buddha's gnosis, seeing the way things really are. So when we talked about that before, we talked about remember the Buddha's wisdom has two modes of knowing, the mode of knowing the way things really are, or what do we say in Tibetan, jitawa, sikbe, jitawa. And the mode of knowing the varieties, jinyepa, that means the way that the omniscient mind knows conventionalities. So the Buddha's gnosis, seeing the way things really are, represents actual reality, the true nature. There, it is not an imputation of something that is not there. Represents the actual reality, the true nature. So that fact that things lack intrinsic existence is its actual true nature. That is not an imputation of something that is not there, like imputing a snake on a rope. This is because the Buddha directly perceives the true nature alone without touching the causally produced things themselves. Or you could say, in the perspective of the Buddha's gnosis that knows the way things really are, there's no touching or appearing of conventional phenomena. That's one way of understanding that. Having fully realized this nature, he is called the awakened one. So this is more or less where we finished last time. We also read this next sentence. As to how such a gnosis does not touch the causally produced entities themselves, this will be analyzed later. And I mentioned that will be in the chapter on the ground of no more learning, or the ground of Buddhahood, when we talk about the Buddha qualities. A very interesting section. So now, today, we read this last time, but we didn't go into so much detail. We did go into some detail on Monday, in case you can look at the transcript of that Monday class if you weren't there. Jimpa translates. Chandrakirti then writes, having thus understood the presentation of the three natures as presented by Chittamatra, one should explain the intended meaning of the scriptures. So through such modes of exposition, we should discern the intention behind the presentation of the three natures, or the three characteristics, as found in the Questions of Maitreya chapter as well. So this needs a little bit of clarification. I think we mentioned a little bit in our last class, but we went into more detail on Monday. So there is a PDF. Doris, did we distribute the PDF about the three natures to everyone last time? I can't remember.
I'm drawing a blank. Just let me refresh my memory.
Yeah.
Which one are you referring to? The three natures. Okay, just a.
So here there were some quotations from Robert Thurman's and Jeffrey Hopkins' translations of Essence of Eloquence. So they went into detail. So that, Richard, you're nodding. So there were those PDFs were, yeah, those were available. So we read a little of that last Monday. So just in short, the Samdi Nirmochana Sutra, when it presents, and other sutras present the three natures from the Chittamatra point of view: dependent nature, imputed nature, and perfect nature, something like that. Or other powered phenomena, imputed phenomena, and the actual mode of being, the highest phenomena. That is presented in the Chittamatra system, whereas in the Prasangika system, as they use a chapter from the 18,000 verse Prajna Paramita, the 25,000 verse, also has this chapter called the chapter of Maitreya. And we went into some details about why that's not found in other versions and so forth. But that in that chapter, Maitreya asks the Buddha about these three natures from the Buddha's perspective, from the final view perspective. The Buddha taught three natures from the Chittamatra point of view, but he also taught in explaining to Maitreya how these are to be understood from the Prasangika point of view. So we went into detail. So if you have a chance to look at the transcript of last Monday's discussion group, you may find some answers there. But we can answer questions now. So Jimpa said, so through such a mode of exposition, we should discern the intention behind the presentation of three natures as found in the Questions of Maitreya chapter as well. We should, on this same basis, also understand how the stated meaning underlying the presentation of the three natures in the Unraveling of the Intent Sutra, so that's the Samdi Nirmochana Sutra, is provisional in meaning. Okay. So that's where we read last time. So the final paragraph here is, in fact, what Chittamatra takes to be the imputed nature. Remember, when they talk about the imputed nature, they talk about a imputed nature that does exist and an imputed nature that does not exist. So the imputed nature that does not exist is this subject-object duality, right? The sense that there is a subject that is a different entity from the object that it's perceiving, like a mind that's perceiving blue. They say they actually, in reality, they are empty of being distinct entities. That emptiness is what they're talking about, that emptiness of that imputed nature, the subject-object duality imputed with dependent nature as its basis. The Chittamatra takes that needs to be critically examined. For the two factors, a subject and an object, are in fact dependent phenomenon, dependent phenomena, subjects and objects. So for Chittamatra, are the subject and object dependent? Nadine, are they dependent phenomena? Dependent on one another?
I think that's not so easy to answer because they arise from the same cause. In some way, yes, but I don't know how to answer.
Right. So yeah, that's a good answer. Okay. But here we're saying for the two factors, subject and object are in fact dependent phenomena. And apart from these two, subject and object, no other third class of dependent phenomena exist. So anything that's a dependent phenomena has to be an object of a consciousness or has to be a consciousness itself that's perceiving other things, right? As for the presentation of the three natures in the Questions of Maitreya chapter, as well as the presentation of the three natures according to the unraveling of the Intent Sutra, I have explained these exhaustively in great detail in my text, the Lekshe Ningpo, the Drangne Lekshe Ningpo, differentiating the provisional and definitive meanings. So Drang is sort of shorthand for provisional or interpretable. Nge, Nges, is shorthand for definitive. So Drangne means the interpretable and the and definitive. Drangne Lekshe Ningpo. So that's a shorter title. The actual title is longer than that, but that's differentiating the provisional and the definitive meanings. So those PDFs that were provided went into Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation because he himself composed the Gompa Rapsel, and he composed the Lekshe Ningpo also. So he's referring to his exposition there. So if you get a chance to read those PDFs, John, in your spare time, you can put them on your car radio when you're driving the kids around or something. You can listen to that. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that. And then, oh yes, so now is appropriate time. Before we go on, so we have now finished, if you want to cheer, the refutation of production from others, right? Some time ago we finished refuting production from self, and then we refuted production from others. But that was a long section because it had so many other subtopics in it, right? Yeah, celebration icon going across my screen there. Now we're going to be beginning the section refuting the generation or production from both self and other. and also from no cause. Remember, there are four possibilities: production from self, from other, from both self and others, and from no cause whatsoever. So those won't take much time, but some effort is needed here. But at this point, I wanted to read a section that I didn't give us earlier. Doris, could you put the other PDF that of Geshe Sopa's comments? Okay. So if you have the ability there, open that up. I have to make it bigger on my screen. My eyes are in need of big type. So this is teachings that Geshe gave July 11th, 2003 in the morning. So you may remember from some of the classes, but probably not, that we're at a point now when Geshe was teaching in 2004. So this is from earlier, but it is relevant to what we're talking about now. So in the morning, among other things, he said, from the text, from the Gompa Rapsal text, it says, Gongla Gongne Sungbe Gongshi Ni. So the Tibetan just leaves a little bit Tibetan there for you. So Gongshi means Gong means like intention, right? Like we say Gompa Rabsel, illuminating the intention. So Gongshi means the basis of the intention, which is, so Geshe says, the basis of the intention, the basis of Buddhist thought, when he taught Chittamatra and so forth, or when he taught things that were not true. Like, for instance, he taught that father and mother are to be killed, right? You may be astounded to know that. Did you know that, Karen? The Buddha taught in a certain context that mother and father it's correct to kill them?
I vaguely remember hearing that before. Couldn't tell you what was meant by it, but
yeah. So yeah, we'll get into that. So the basis of the intention of the Buddhist thought means the Buddha thinking of finally leading to something real, some actual thing, in order to lead to that, even to teach incorrect things temporarily to some beings. Okay, so teaching something which is incorrect with the final goal of leading them to the correct thing. You might think that that's not good teaching. You might think, if you're a pedagogical kind of person. This kind of basis of Buddhist thought, the kind of basis in Buddhist thought, what his actual thought was, means finally where you lead. That base is the gongshi above in that phrase. So therefore, alaya vijnana, my abbreviations when I was making the transcript, ST means so therefore. Geshe always said so therefore. Alaya vijnana was taught to these disciples, right? That was not his. He didn't mean that literally, but he had a basis in that, his intention. Alaya was taught to these disciples, but here the actual basis of thinking, what he was actually thinking of, was shunyata. As in fact, sometimes alaya vijnana in some texts, is equated with emptiness. What is the basis of intention? Actually, emptiness itself is the basis of the Buddhist thought. His basis is shunyata, right? He taught alaya vijnana to yogacharans, to the Chittamatrans. Having given that name, alaya vijnana, but his real thinking was shunyata. That's what he was actually referring to. That's what he was going to try to lead these people to, the people that were suitable recipients for the Chittamatra teachings. This is the basis in Buddhist thought. Anyway, shunyata will later be shown as the basic intention. Having intended emptiness, And he's by saying alaya vijnana. Some Mahayana sutras also use emptiness itself as alaya, the basis. Alaya is the basis of all things. So alaya vijnana would be the vijnana, the consciousness of the nature of all things, right? The alaya is sort of like the basis. So that's referring to the to emptiness. Alaya is the base of all. Meaning is base of all. Is shunyata the base, the source of everything? Is shunyata the cause of everything? Well, shunyata is not a cause, is it? But maybe it could be called the base of everything, the nature of everything, because that's the fundamental nature. So Geshe-la said, sometimes in the Yogacara system, there are two alayas. So generally, we've talked about this before. One sense of alaya is the sense that it is passive recipient of all the seeds, and in another sense, it is an actual consciousness. It is an alaya vijnana. Sometimes in the Yogacara system, there are two alayas. The base of all can mean the consciousness itself, the alaya vijnana, and also can mean the seed or potentials, the seeds or potentials that exist there on alaya. So those seeds or potentials can be said to be the basis of all, right? That is also a seed type of alaya. So these two types of alaya, one means the consciousness itself, and one means the seed type of alaya. These two kinds of alaya, one is consciousness, one is non-consciousness, one is not consciousness. Anyway, both of them are the base of all. But here in Prasangika system, these things are not accepted. Shunyata, emptiness, is the base of all. So we don't say that the seeds or the alaya vijnana are the base of all, but we say that emptiness is the base of all. That means chu tamche tongpani dugyur. When we say in the certain sadhanas, we say all things become empty. Chu tamche. Where I have to get my glasses on again here. Where was I reading? Chu tamche. That means all phenomena. Tamche means all. Chu means phenomena. Dharmas. Tongpa nidugyur, transform into emptiness or become empty. So that's so that the instruction before you meditate on emptiness is telling you to meditate on emptiness. This doesn't mean that they, or you could translate it as all phenomena are empty. Chutamshi tongpa nidugyur, but the way that it's phrased there, that's often the instruction before you're meditating, to meditate on emptiness. All things, make them become empty by meditating on emptiness. Everything is empty. If things are empty, then it is possible to grow. It's possible to produce. It's possible to be generated and so forth. There is space. They grow or cease. Say, when we talk about the mind, also things can enter into the mind and then they can reabsorb back into the mind. They can cease and are different. Things are different. All of these things have dependent nature. It is not dependent, not empty of inherent existence, if it is not dependent. If things are not dependent, if they're not empty of inherent existence, if everything inherently exists, absolutely exists, then you can't change anything. You are just stuck there, right? Shunyata makes everything possible. It means that phenomena exist relatively, conventionally. They exist dependently, and everything that appears to you is not real as it appears, because the way that it appears is that it appears to be truly existent, inherently existent. It is not true. and everything that appears to you is not real as it appears. Shunyata means to exist in the opposite way. It means to exist dependently, empty of inherent existence. For example, here, space, that is not shunyata, but space allows, so space has this similarity that we've talked about also when we talk about the clear light nature of the mind, also has this quality. Space allows or helps physical things grow and move and all these things. It allows that, right? That the clear, let's say also when we talk about the non-compounded space, it allows the things to grow into it and so forth. Also, the clear light nature of the mind allows phenomena to arise into it and to reabsorb back into it. If there is empty space, then you can have. If there is no space, the space didn't exist, you're completely blocked. If there was not space for me, on my desk to put my mug, I'd be stuck. I couldn't move it there because there's no space, but there is space. You are completely blocked. You can't do all of those things. Similar to that, shunyata goes much further. Everything that exists has this true nature that is emptiness. Its own nature is emptiness. Sometimes, therefore, emptiness is called the cause of everything. So basically, emptiness cannot be a cause because it's permanent, but sometimes it can be thought of as, because it allows things to exist, it can be called the cause of everything. Although it is not a real cause, but because things are empty, therefore this can exist. Because of emptiness, things can exist. That can exist. In this way, it looks like it is similar to a cause, similar to a base. Shunyata is not a physical base like the ground or earth or something, but it is like a ground or base. So when the Buddha talked about alaya vijnana, the basis of all, and his actual intention was emptiness, he was using it in that not literal sense, but sort of metaphorical sense that it is like a base. Shunyata is not a physical base like the ground or earth or something, but it is like the ground. It is like the ground or like a base. Otherwise, you can't change. If things didn't have this empty nature, we are also sometimes born, sometimes every moment changing, and then finally death, etc. If you are stuck first inherently, then you can't change. If you are inherently existent from the beginning, you can't change at all. You're stuck there. You wouldn't be able. Maybe you would feel that's good. You wouldn't grow old. You can't go anywhere. You're just stuck there. But because everything exists dependently, everything exists in a relative way, conventionally existent, then that can happen. That is the meaning of that. Anyway, his aim, his thought, the Buddha's thought, his purpose or purport, meaning or thought, is only the emptiness that is empty of inherent existence, because there are other kinds of emptiness, right? Emptiness of the self-supporting substantially existence and so forth. But he's talking about the emptiness as the emptiness of inherent existence. One should understand it as just called alaya vijnana by word, but is not real. Okay, so that's some background. So here, calling that the base of all is because that nature fully imbues all things, fully exists in all things. Talking about shunyata as the base of all, alaya, means that, so in Tibetan we say kun shi, kun shi. Kun means all, shi means basis. So basis of all. That means, in that way, alaya means whatever exists in the world has that nature, the emptiness of inherent existence. It goes everywhere without exception. That is the reason for sometimes saying the word or name, alaya vijnana. So through the power of a special purpose, by that force of that, the Buddha taught the existence of alaya vijnana. So due to that ulterior motive, you might say, the Buddha taught alaya vijnana, thinking to lead beings to the true base of all, lead them to shunyata. So for that final purpose, temporarily, some people are not directly shown emptiness. So people that are not ready to hear about emptiness directly, the Buddha didn't teach them from the beginning skillfully. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to help them. Not only that, Buddha taught many things which are not true in other circumstances, in other situations, due to special purpose. Many things were taught that way. Why? You can see, you have to, even I've edited this transcript of Geshe-la quite a bit. His English is broken, sort of like my English sometimes. So you have to add a couple of words here and there. Many things were taught. What the root text says, this is earlier in our text, verse 643, the first line of that. Kunshi, that's alaya vijnana, yu ching, so yu means exists. Kunshi exists, and kangsak ni yola. So a kangsak means a person that also exists. So what the root text says here, not only alaya vijnana, the Buddha also taught in certain circumstances substantially existent self. You know, Buddha's famous teaching is no self, right? But in some circumstances, the Buddha did teach about as though the person was substantially existent. That means some kind of permanent, absolute, real soul or substance. To whom he taught this temporarily, so that means that's not the final teaching that he intended for those individuals. They would later be led to emptiness. To those he taught temporarily about this substantially existent person, if you say empty to some people, they will not listen, right? They will get freaked out. That's beyond the pale. For example, according to the way of non-Buddhists or some schools, some first assuming a substantially existence exists, then to show something else leading that way. So first the Buddha taught, like in the Vaibhashika and so forth, that things were substantially existent, and then to show something else once they've reached that point, maybe providing them with absurd consequences of holding that position and so forth. So therefore, alaya vijnana and self or soul, or self of person, also sometimes is shown. The reason is human beings or living beings who need to be tamed through that, need to show that to them. By showing that, Jesu zimpe chir, it can mean in order to lead them, Jesu zimpa, or in order to take care of them. Usually it was one of the attributes when we talk about the gurus. Yeah, Paul.
Just wondering if you want to take a break sometime soon, Venerable George. The only reason is because my knees are starting to hurt.
Yeah.
So I'm worried about yours.
Yeah, mine also. So let me just finish that little idea there. So sometimes when we talk about the guru, thanks for the reminder. When we talk about the gurus, we talk about them caring for us, Jesu zimpa, may I always be cared for you. So following what is teaching, then he leads slowly to the real truth. First, indirectly, according to their own way, what is appropriate for them at that point, what they can accept. For example, not only the Buddha taught Alaya Vijnana, but even Buddhism accepts the emptiness of a self, or even Buddhism accepts the emptiness of self or selflessness. But sometimes permanent self or soul was taught according to like some of the Tirthakas believe, the Tirthakas of the non-Buddhists. In the same way, some Vaibhashikas accept something like that. To them, for example, this sutra, this citation, as is said, Gelong Dak, that means bhikshus. Bungpo nga ni kuro, the five aggregates are the burden. Kurwa kurwe ni kangsa go. So the kangsak is the person is the carrier of the burden. Let's leave it there. You can read a little bit in the break if you want, and we're going to take a little break. Thank you. Hope you had a nice break. Okay. So let me just read a little bit further here. I find this next this next section is the reason I wanted to read this to you. So in Tibetan it says, the Buddha said, "O Gelongs, the self, Pungpo Ngani Kuro, the five aggregates are the burden, and the carrier of the burden is the person." So that's implying that the person is some kind of substantially existent thing. That statement means that the five aggregates, the five skandhas, the Pungpo Nga, are like a burden, a load to be carried. There is also a real, and it's implying that there is also a real substantial self that carries those five aggregates, according to like the Tirthakas' beliefs. The Tirthakas, the non-Buddhist schools, or even the Buddhist schools that don't accord with the correct view could be called Tirthakas. There is a permanent soul which has the possession of the five aggregates, right? So the five aggregates are like its burden. So therefore, we have to say temporarily to them, to the people that believe that, yes, there is a self who is carrying these things. So this is a skillful means of the Buddha. He's saying something which is incorrect temporarily to a particular audience for the purpose of, keeping their attention and leading them eventually to the right view. The Tirthaka believes that there is a permanent soul, a self which has this possession of the five aggregates. So therefore, he has to say temporarily for them, yes, there is a self who is carrying those things. Later, he will have to show that there is no self, but from the very beginning, leading them, they are not capable to understand that there is no self. So it's kind of fruitless. It's like, what is it? What's the expression in English? Talking to a brick wall or something like that. We'll come across the expression like that in a second. What does that mean, talking to a brick wall? Anyone familiar with American?
That means you're not going to make any progress in your argument. It's like something like
The
that.
other person is like a brick wall. They're not going to hear what you're saying. They're just like, yeah. So anyway, if Buddha says that they're empty of inherent existence, they will go away. Nobody wants to listen to that, they will say. they will say the Buddha is crazy. And that's often the case when you read some modern Christian people who write about Buddhism. Anyway, many times Buddha spoke of true existence, a self of phenomena that does not exist in reality, but in some places, in some situations, he shows a self of phenomena. He shows, he sort of taught that. A self of persons does not exist. Say, for instance, in the lower schools, the Vaibhashika, the self of a self of persons does not exist. There's selflessness of person, but he also shows a real self of person in certain circumstances, a real self of phenomena. Those things, object and subjects are different entities, but showing absolute inherently one entity and so forth. There are so many things which Buddha sometimes has to teach. Different disciples with different capacities. So therefore, at first to state certain things to some, we state certain things in order to lead them to another place. So this is the stanza that I wanted to bring up to you that I'd mentioned obliquely several times in the past. So there's the Tibetan there, if you'd like to read along in the Tibetan, where it begins Brumje. Do you know what Brumje means? John, do you know what Brumje means?
I hadn't heard that before. That's a name. That's one of the names for Dromten.
That's what Atisha reverently called Drondempa, his disciple, because there's some legend that at one point when Drondempa, the disciple of attendant of Atisha, was said to be an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, and the Dalai Lama is said to be, the present incarnation of that. So when Drondempa at one time was in meditation, he appeared as the Sanskrit syllable broom. The Tibetans don't say broom, they would say what? Trum. They would pronounce it trum or something like that. But broom, he appeared as the syllable broom. So when Atisha referred to him as Broomje, the venerable or the exalted broom, he was alluding to the qualities of his disciple. So that's sort of a nickname for Drondempa. So I'll read the translation that I made of this stanza. So this is a stanza from the Book of Kadam, which Paul very kindly provided me with a copy that I could have. I usually have the copy. I've looked everywhere. I can't find it. Maybe that was, I see the emptiness of that book. But so the Book of Kadam has a couple of sections. The sayings of the father, that means Atisha, and the teachings of the son, meaning Drondempa, his spiritual son. Doesn't mean his that Atisha was the actual physical father of Drondempa. So in the section on the teachings of Atisha, there comes this thing, and this was translated also by Thupten Jinpo, that we'll read his translation in a minute. So the way I translated it is sort of, he's calling to Drondempa. Drondempa, within the endless samsara, which is without freedom from the quagmire of the afflictions, since those who repeatedly cycle drowsily do not understand the words of the wise, so that the kind of implying that those who keep on circling within cyclic existence, sort of like obliviously, just as though in a daze, drowsily, they do not understand the words of the wise. Like that poured into the ear of a fool. So this takes some interpretation. So you could talk about pouring, information into the ear, or like if you were to insert medicine into the ear of someone who's not sophisticated, they might shake their head, or a child, they might shake their head and get rid of the medicine that's meant to cure their ailment. Like that poured into the ear of a fool, I have uttered these words resembling an informal argument. May the wise not speak of this as an ignorant flaw or a mistake. For example, so there's a famous example. I guess you'll like this very much. Since a small child walking toward a precipice cannot be turned back by words without lying. Say, for instance, if you say, hey, stop, you're getting near the edge of the cliff. The child is just keeps on going. That's not going to get them. You have to do something to catch their attention. If you say the words that are true without lying, that doesn't help. So saying there is an alu in an empty hand. So alu. So holding out your clenched fist to them and saying alu, kind of like treat, or alu can mean potato. It's an Indian word for potato. That's what Geshe-la chose as one of what he thought it might mean, but it could mean other things, some kind of treat. So, or like, what would we say? Chiclet, sugary candy, and the child stops and turns around and is prevented from going over the precipice. For example, since a small child walking toward a precipice cannot be turned around by words without lying, saying, this is an alu, a potato or a sweet treat, in an empty hand, it is identical to how the wise guide through skillful means. Sometimes the Buddha has to say there is he says something attractive that is not the actual truth. This is the nature of samsaric afflictions. This is what is to be abandoned by the wise. And this is the last stanza of that the seventh chapter of that sayings of the Father. This is the collection on dependent origination, the seventh. So Thupten Jinpa's translation, he has a big volume on the Book of Kadam, which is available. Do you have that, Mikhail? Do you have the Book of Kadam, the English translation? No? So you can get the Tibetan on Thupten Jinpa's site if you'd like to. But anyway, Thupten Jinpa's translation says, Master Broom. So Broomje is referring to Drondenpa. In this limitless cycle of existence, those who are sunk again and again in the mire of the afflictions with no escape do not understand through the words of the wise. Therefore, even though I have spoken these challenging words to you, the wise do not criticize the ignorant, pouring words into a fool's ears. Okay, so the structure is a little bit contorted there. So this is similar to the story of the infant crawling toward the edge of a cliff who was not stopped by the truth. So the truth meaning, as we said before, be careful, you're going to fall over, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to have to take a bath if you fall in the ditch, whatever. You're telling the truth. It doesn't dissuade them. With nothing in hand and merely calling out, little child. So Jinpa translates alu as little child. So that may be, but I don't know where he came up with that. But Geshe-la and other commentators seem to take alu as meaning something, because you're talking about something in your hand. Your hand is actually empty. You don't even have a potato or a treat in it, but you're tempting them to get them to come back to you, right? Don't we do that with dogs? Or if you're cruel, get your dog to behave. Say, here's the treat. What is that greenies they call them? Or is that for cats? The treat for cats?
I think that's for cats.
For cats. So it's a greenie. Your cat is scratching up your neighbor's shoes or something like that to get them to come over to you, even though you don't have a greenie in your hand. This is similar to the story of the infant crawling toward the edge of a cliff who was not stopped by truth. With nothing in hand and merely calling out, "Little child," the wise one skillfully led the child away. Here too, it is the afflictions, the samsaric phenomena, which are the objects of abandonment for the wise. This is the seventh collection on dependent origination. So Geshe-la's commentary was, this is similar, like the word, like in the word, this is similar, like in the world, a little baby going towards some kind of very dangerous and deep, big ditch or cliff out there. The baby has already gone there and is in great danger of falling over. So now you have to draw back the baby's attention instead of letting them fall down there. Now here, a person, the mother or somebody says, "Don't go there. That is very dangerous. If you fall there, such and such will happen." If you explain what is exactly the truth, the child will never turn back. Maybe some children will, but many won't. They will not understand any words without any kind of lying. If you explain the truth, that kind of method will not work here. Then what to do? What can you say? Without anything, and Changmei in the Tibetan, Changmei is short for Chiangmei, which means nothing at all. So Lakna Changmei, so that means with nothing in the hand, you don't actually have anything, but you say, "Alu, alu, alu, come, hey, alu, alu, alu." Then the child will come back with their attention. That is the special method. Skillful ones sometimes use this kind of special method to draw the attention. So once you get there, you teach something that is appropriate to them to get their attention. So once you get there, you can teach there is something else than that. But these kinds of things sometimes, so there is nothing in hand, Changmei Lakna, in the hand, nothing. Alu she, saying alu. I'm not sure what alu is. Anyway, alu, alu, saying like that, saying maybe baby likes alu. Maybe alu is an Indian word. Alu is the potato. So anyway, and that would make sense because Atisha was Indian. So when he was writing these and it was being translated into Tibetan, they may have just translated what he was talking about, alu, so sweet potato. That will draw the attention. That is the Khapa Tapki Drendang Sung, similar to the skillful method of the scholars or the skillful ones, the Khapa. The masters who have special methods, a way to draw the attention. So like that, the Buddha is a skillful master who has omniscience, so he knows what is best to teach to this disciple. Temporarily, even not even correct temporarily. So sometimes the Buddha taught a self of persons. So this is the last thing here. In the Sutra of removing the regret of Ajatasattu. It doesn't say the English translation here. Make dra gope selwe do. So selwa means to sort of remove. Gyopa means, with that prefix gyopa, that means regret. Makeda. So who knows something about Makeda? Ajatasattu. Who is Ajatasattu?
I remember he was a king who killed his father to usurp the throne or something like that.
Yeah, so he's a very important character in the Buddhist life story.
I think he was a sage in one of his past lives, and then the king killed the sage, and then the sage reincarnated to become king's son.
Right. So that will be connected later. So Ajatasattu was the son of King Bimbisara. So when you're the son of a king, the Rajaputra, you are the prince, right? So at first he was prince, and as Mintu was referring to, he had this ambition to become king, but Bimbisara was one of the great benefactors of the Buddha. Maybe you know from the sutras, King Bimbisara hosted the Buddha so many times, teachings and everything, great benefactor of the monasteries. So he had a lot of merit, and he wasn't going to die soon, and Ajatasattu was getting a little bit itchy. I was going to make some political analogies, but anyway, so he actually imprisoned his father, and eventually his father died while being in prison. So he caused the death of his father, which was one of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, right? And so also he had supposedly he did some other relatively heavy negative actions, like he supported Devadatta in his quest to take over the Sangha, cause schism in the Sangha and everything. And so he was a supporter of Devadatta, so created a lot of negativity that way. Also had sexual relationship with his mother, it's said. So that's one of the 5 actions, similar to the 5 actions of immediate retribution. So that is a Jatasashtra. So once he realized that he had caused the death of his father, who was blameless, and he was going to have all of these negative consequences, he had incredible distress. He was regretting that. So this is the sutra clearing away the regret of Ajatasattu. So the sutra says, father and mother are to be killed, Geshe-la says. All the kingdom destroyed, then that person will become pure. If you get rid of those things, you become pure. That is also an indirect sutra. The sutra says father and mother are to be killed. Of course, it doesn't mean that literally. It was temporarily taught to a certain person, Ajatasattu. Actually, Bimbisara, which was the king, Gyalpo Sukchen Ningbo, king, his son, the prince Ajatasattu, became king afterwards, King Ajatasattu, Makeda, who killed his father, and he almost died later, regretting. Temporarily, for a short time, the Buddha taught Ajatasattu certain things in order for him to believe Buddha. So when the Buddha taught, what was his actual meaning? Does anybody know when the Buddha taught the father is to be killed, the mother is to be killed? What is said in the teachings? Do you know, Suvash? Have you heard?
I was going to say inherently existent.
Yeah. So when we talk about the mother, when we talk about the mother, usually mother is, when we talk about the mother sutras, the mother of all the Buddhas is the realization of emptiness, right? The prajnaparamita. So the negative of the negative mother is the ignorance that holds things to be inherently existent, so forth. So the Buddha was leading like that. So Geshe-la finished. So otherwise, killing father and mother are 2 of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, right? What are the 5 actions of immediate retribution? Do you know, Richard? Okay. Anna, do you know the 5 actions of immediate retribution?
It's killing your mother, your father, and I know something like drawing blood from the Buddha.
Yeah, that's one of them. Drawing blood from a Buddha, Tathagata. Killing an arhat.
Killing an arhat.
Causing
a schism in the Sangha.
The Sangha, the Buddhist Sangha. So those were the 5 actions that occurred during the time of the Buddha that were said to be so heavy that upon death, you immediately had the karmic retribution or karmic ripening of those events, being born in the deepest hells. So Ajatasattu had that kind of worry. So otherwise, killing father and mother are two of the five actions of immediate retribution, because he had killed his father. He hadn't killed his mother, but he had the regret for killing his father. So the Buddha taught him this sort of to cause his regret to go down, his despair, his paranoia, so that he could listen to the Buddha, and then the Buddha could teach him that what he meant by mother and father was something different than that. So that means immediately to go to hell. Without a boundary means borderline, immediately after death, go straight to hell, etc. To somebody who knows those things, they would have great regret, and as a result of that regret, almost approaching death, dying, almost to the point of, there are some people that have done some things that they've regretted so much that that causes them almost to die just from that, or else they commit suicide, right? They've regretted things. So then in order to protect for some time, the Buddha taught like that. The Buddha taught that father and mother are to be killed. But this father and mother, actually, reality, the basis of his thought later, where you read, joining together, father is like karma, right? Mother is like mental delusion, ignorance, the opposite of the mother being the perfection of wisdom. So father is like the merit side, karma. Usually the father is the method side. The mother is the wisdom side. Here is the opposite of that is ignorance. Those father and mother, mental delusions and karma, joining together, we are samsaric babies. So that's the father and mother that is to be killed. That's what you have to get rid of. You have to get rid of karma, your negative karma, and even your virtuous karma eventually, and the delusions, the ignorance that caused them. So many babies in samsara, a result of, because of the parents, that kind of thing. Later we will talk, those are interpretable sutras. So this was at a point earlier in the text. Yeah, Mikhail.
Yeah, just about the five immediate karmas. I had in mind the fact that not only you go directly in bad migrations, but also that you do not even go through intermediate state.
Right.
Okay.
No, yeah. So immediate retribution means, yeah, you go there without having another rebirth, without even going into the intermediate state. And that's one of the examples of the few cases where you go from one life without going through the intermediate state. Say, for instance, what was another example where you immediately reborn without going through the intermediate state? Does anyone know? We mentioned
the formless realms.
Formless realms and the formless realms also, but also rebirth when you have a spontaneous rebirth, like Padmasambhava, something like that. Those are said to be the only exceptions when you don't have an intermediate state existence, rebirth. Okay, so I wanted to bring.
I heard that if some people have really strong faith in the Pure Land, they will go directly to the Pure Land after that without going to the intermediate state too, right?
I can't attest to that. I don't know that, but that sounds quite possible. That would be similar kind of thing to a miraculous birth. Thank you, Minto. You have some information that I hadn't heard that. Okay, so I wanted to present that because that was something that was meant to be presented earlier, but at the time when we were talking about, before we actually entered into the deep discussion about interpretable and definitive sutras, that came in an earlier section. But the quotation from the book of Kadam, what is that called in Tibetan? Do you know, Paul?
That's the
Kadam Lekbam, I think.
Kadam
Lekbam.
Lekbam. Yeah. So it's a very famous text, very, very difficult to understand. I think that's why in the series that Thupten Jinpa translated, that was one that the Dalai Lama had suggested that was, would utilize Jinpa's, scholarship and translation ability that was worth translating that hadn't been translated. Even now to find even the Tibetan of it is difficult. Okay, so now we're moving on. We've graduated from refutation of generation from self and others, now refuting arising or production from both self and others and from no cause. So, so Jinpa says, refuting arising from both self and other. That's the first outline here. The Jains, here he says, the Jainas propound arising from both poles. So Suvash, Venerable Shanka's not here, and Snehi's not here. So you're someone who's versed also in Indian culture, obviously. Are they called Jains in India? Is that the actual Indian name?
Yes, just Jain, not Jaina.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure where he got Jainas. Paul, you edited this. Do you know what Jainas is? That
I didn't. Editing is being generous. I read it through and made some observations. I don't remember where he's getting it from.
So
Sorry.
anyway, so we could say the Jains. So that the Jains were the followers of what was their famous follower, who was more or less a contemporary of the Buddha, maybe born a little bit before, a little bit after, I can't remember, but sort of contemporary to the Buddha. They wore the all white clothes, or sometimes went naked. They were the ones, and still in Jain communities that still exist to this day, they can be seen with brooms sweeping before them to make sure that there's no bugs that they inadvertently step on, and so forth. They were vegetarian and very noble in their goals and so forth. But their view of how to achieve nirvana was something which would not lead you to nirvana. So anyway, here it says the Jains propound arising from both poles, from both positions of self and others. Self arising and arising from other. So when a clay pot emerges from factors such as a lump of clay, a kneading stick, which I guess you knead the clay, like when you're kneading bread, right? Maybe there's something like that for clay. A spinning wheel. These are the factors that are sort of like cooperative conditions, right? Threads. So when you're on the wheel, you have a thread that you could use to move on the clay to leave some kind of distortion there. Water and the potter. The Jains think that since the clay pot comes into being only in the nature of clay, it arises from itself. And given that factors other than clay, such as the activity of the potter, are engendering causes of the clay pot, it arises from something other than itself also. So that's why they're saying is it arises from both self and other. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, and just as with external things, inner experiences also arise from both self and others. That's what the Jain position is. Jains present 9 categories of reality. Life force, which is referred to as person or self, faculties, and so on, that are other than life force, dharma, that helps to attain higher rebirth and definite goodness, what they call moksha, liberation. Fourth, the opposite of dharma, non-dharma, which leads to bondage. Pollutant afflictions, It's the fifth one. Sixth one, vows that prevent immorality and so on, which include seventh one, happiness, eighth one, suffering, ninth one, cohering force, which both arises from cognition and serves as the cause of cognition. Okay, this is where we'll begin next time. And on Monday, we will, besides reviewing the other PDFs and other questions that you have, I'll try to have a PDF about these 9 categories of reality that the Jains hold. So I'll just read another sentence or two. Jains assert that a person called, for instance, Maitreya, likes to use the word Maitreya. Jains assert that a person, say for instance, called Maitreya, has taken birth in this life because he existed in past lives and died endowed with life force, and hence he is self-arisen, so born from self. For Maitreya and his life force are not different. So he is born from self. Life force possesses mobility, moving from one birth to another. They say it travels into such transmigrations as those of the celestial realms. However, since Maitreya arises from other factors, such as his parents, from wholesome and unwholesome factors, from the pollutants and so on, Maitreya is said to arise from something other as well. Therefore, they claim, we do not assert arising from self or from something other individually. So the specific refutation of self-arising and arising from other presented above will not affect us. We say it's both. So to refute this, the root text says, verse 698a and b, first 2 lines, arising from both self and others is also not logical, Prasangika says, for it is vulnerable to the objections already raised. Okay, that's where we'll begin next time. How are we doing?
Sorry, Venerable, can you clarify where we're starting next week?
Yeah, we're going to start with this. We'll review, but we'll start with the 9 categories of reality, where the sentence says the Jainas present 9 categories of reality. But I will review the fact that we're refuting arising from both self and other.
Thank you.
And we'll go on from there. Yeah. Suvash, what do you think?
Since we're talking about Jains, I thought I will just mention that not long ago, I was listening to a lecture series on mathematics, number theory, and the teacher is a professor here in the United States. He said that the concept of zero is attributed to the Jains.
Oh, is that right? Mm-hmm.
Yes. Most cultures, civilizations couldn't didn't come up with that. It is the Jains who came up with the number zero. And I just did a quick check on AI, and AI also says it's attributed to the Jains.
Yeah, so I didn't realize it was particular to the Jains. I'd heard that it was a concept derived from Indian mathematicians, and so that would be consistent with being the specific Jain mathematicians or Jain philosophy. So that's interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah. So before we end, anyone have any questions about today? Any observations or any other questions? Nadine, you okay? You have a paper with some questions on it?
Yes, I was wondering, non-compounded space, the conventional nature of the mind, and the ultimate nature of phenomena, are these all kind of negations?
They are all mere negations or non-affirming negations that don't imply anything in their place. That's why to the mind, they all appear similar. Uncompounded space, when you're actually meditating on uncompounded space, you're not seeing space or thinking about the space in between things. You're thinking of just the lack of obstructing contact. That appears to the mind as a mere vacuity. Also, when you meditate on emptiness, that appears to the mind as a mere vacuity. Similar kind of appearance. And when you meditate on the clear light nature of the mind, the conventional clear light nature of the mind, that also appears as a mere negation, a vacuity. They all have a similar appearance, but what brought you to them, the fact that they have different effects on the mind, say meditating on the on non-compounded space doesn't eliminate any afflictions. It doesn't, it doesn't help you in any particular way. Meditating on the clear light nature, conventional clear light nature of the mind does help to subdue some afflictions, but doesn't eliminate them entirely. Although these three appearances are similar, what brought you to those appearances and what the mind is being held by is different, and therefore they have different effects on the mind, meditating on them.
And did I understand correctly that they are kind of the most important phenomena since they are the basis of all other phenomena? Most important, so these negations are most important of all.
I'm not sure. Negations of emptiness or negations of
all three, they are the most important phenomena. They are the basis of all. The base of all.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
We talked about today the base of all, and it was related to shunyata, but
Right.
also non-compounded space, and also the nature of mind. They're also similar, right?
Well, they themselves are empty of inherent existence, right? Both non-compounded space and the conventional nature of the mind, they both are empty of inherent existence. So they don't have the same status as being called alaya, the basis of all, as shunyata. I wouldn't call the uncompounded space the basis of all. You could use it colloquially in a similar way, talking to people that the fact that there's no obstruction allows plants to grow. If there was obstruction, they couldn't grow, or things to change and so forth. But doesn't have the same importance as calling alaya the basis of all, referring to alaya as shunyata. Shunyata is the basis of all because it allows all of these other things to exist. Okay, Mintu, what do you think?
I have a question, but it's sort of unrelated. So, like, in a lot of texts I read about the Dharmakaya, the Dharmakaya of the Buddha is basically pervade all phenomena, right? And I'm just curious, like, what exactly is the Dharmakaya?
What is the Dharmakaya? So there are two Dharmakayas, right? There's the wisdom Dharmakaya, the Jnana Dharmakaya, and there is the Svavavikakaya or Svavavikakaya, which is the emptiness of the Buddhist mind. But basically, when we say Dharmakaya, we mean the wisdom Dharmakaya, the Buddha's omniscient mind. So the fact that the omniscient mind knows all phenomena instantaneously. It doesn't have to say some far universe away from here, trillions of universes away from us. The Buddha knows every detail of that right now, means that the Buddha's mind pervades there. The Buddha's mind is omnipresent and omniscient and omnipotent, all powerful. So the fact that from what we know from Tantra, the fact that the Buddha's mind is omnipresent, you can't, you can't hide under your covers and do some naughty activities that the Buddha, you're smoking your cigarette or your joint or something, thinking the Buddha doesn't see. The Buddha's mind is everywhere, because the wind that is the mount of the Buddha's mind pervades everywhere. So the Buddha is omnipresent all the time. So when we visualize the field of merit, Lama Yeshe liked to say it wasn't mandatory that you invite them. You invite the wisdom beings to inhabit it. The Buddha's omniscient mind is present there anyway, but the invocation of the wisdom beings and so forth is for your sake to accumulate merit. Okay. So yeah, so let's dedicate this store of virtue that we've created. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very state. Due to these virtues, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not yet arisen arise and grow, both in my mind and the mind of others. So we can dedicate our merits that others generate bodhicitta, and may that bodhicitta that has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more as a result of these virtues. Purest teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, Drakpa, meaning Lama Tsongkhapa, spiritual father to his two sons, Gyaltsab and Kedub, together with your lineages, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you Lama Zopa wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Inseparable, venerable Guru, esteemed Guru, I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge. You, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings, the Buddhist teachings, and for the welfare of mother migrating beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You suddenly passed away, at which point I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of mind generation, which you know is a synonym of bodhicitta, the great waves of mind generation of the children of the victorious ones, by the truth of these phenomena existing, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And finally, for all of our teachers, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging mercifully with skillful means, illuminating spiritual friends, I make requests. Please live long and stable lives. Okay, a couple of people had to leave beforehand. Understandable. Doris?
Thank you, Venerable. Sorry, could we make dedication and prayer for His Holiness' quick recovery from surgery?
Yes, so His Holiness, maybe you've heard, has had, I think it was a knee replacement or hip replacement? Knee.
It was the other knee. He had the right done last year and the left this year, but I could have that backwards.
Okay. The right knee maybe was the method side. did last year. The wisdom side, the left side, left knee. So he's recovering. I saw a photo that of him with a Tibetan doctor or a doctor, surgeon in Delhi. It looked, maybe it was just Indian, with his hand around the Dalai Lama's shoulder, and the Dalai Lama looked kind of like exhausted from the operation, but apparently he's recovering. So, yes, thinking, may these virtues become the cause of quick recovery of the appearance of the the great Nirmanakaya of the Dalai Lama. So that means that's not that the Dalai Lama needs any of our karmic help, but other sentient beings, how he appears to us, that depends on karma and so forth. Okay, thank you for your patience. Good questions, and look forward to seeing some of you on Monday and all of you next Saturday. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you, Venerable
Thank
George.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.